This photo is another corker from Rick Ayrton. It shows me right at the end of the dive on the wreck that's the subject of today's video. It was a stunning day for diving. You've already seen how good the visibility was underwater, but it was also fabulous on the surface. Warm, sunny, flat seas, just the way we like it. We also had a great result. Even though the wreck had been dived before, it had never been identified, and this small piece of broken plate allowed us to do exactly that. The more eagle-eyed amongst you may already have noticed the logo from the famous Cunard shipping line, and not surprisingly, this is what gave us the most significant clue. More of that later though. In one of my other videos, somebody asked me what it was like on the surface before you go in. Well, this is us all getting ready, and you can see there, that's Liz. She's the crew on the boat. She's absolutely awesome. Her role is to make sure that everybody's got everything ready and then help us get in and out of the water. On top of that, she's also great. She laughs at our jokes, keeps us fed and watered, and just generally makes sure everything runs super smoothly. Down the other end of the boat there, that's James. He's a skipper, definitely one of the best in the business, and he loves this kind of stuff. Nothing gives him greater pleasure than identifying an unknown wreck and seeing the kind of video and images and stuff that we bring back up to the surface. It's a real privilege to be part of the team that dive off his boat. I'm actually in second today. There's three of us in our little mini team. As well as Rick and myself, there's a guy called Andy. You'll see him because he wears kind of multicoloured fins and dives a Liberty, which is relatively unusual for our team. So the first pair are already in. They've attached the waster to the wreck. They've sent up the pellet, or the pill, sometimes called. So our job is we're in second, and we're going to be putting in the lazy shot. You saw it coiled up on the boat just before I stepped onto the lift. So I'm sat here now, waiting for the call, and as soon as I get it from Liz, there you go, I'm in the water. Next job is obviously going to be to get straight onto the shot line and get myself down. You've probably noticed that I'm not diving with my scooter today. I don't always dive with it. The reason for it is because we know the wreck is relatively small today, and it's also, by our standards, reasonably shallow, so it's only 73, 74 metres. Looking down there, you can see Rick, obviously, to my right-hand side. Down the bottom there is Andy. He's got the orange oxygen and diluent cylinders. He's also taken in the lazy shot. He's been really good, actually. He's got it clipped onto the shot line really quickly. And we're now all heading down. So you can see there's Rick in front of me, Andy down the bottom, and we're all descending. The lazy shot's going to get clipped in with a Prosic, probably round about 40 metres. So we've got a bit of descent. And you can see the two lines. The line on the right, that's the shot line, which is attached to the wreck. The line on the left, that's the lazy shot that we're going to clip on with a Prosic. Now, interestingly enough, Andy's let go of it. A little trick I always do is there's a couple of kilos weight on the bottom of that line, so I always hold on to the line and allow it to pull me down. It's just a way of getting down a bit quicker. As it turns out, it seems I'm getting down pretty quickly anyway, so I've managed to leave Rick and Andy behind me. And as you'll see in a minute, I'm going to be first to get to the end where we need to attach the lazy shot. As this point in a dive, as you head down, I mean, you can see me clearing my ears there. That's what my yellow gloved hand is coming up to my face for. Also got my torch on there. But the next thing on the agenda is going to be getting the lazy shot set up. You see we've already put our tags on it. That's another one of our little procedures. There's also the tags on from the first pair of divers in the water, because clearly it wasn't there when they went down the shot line. So that's why when I get to it, you'll see there's 5 tags on the end already. So there you go. You can see it's starting to come into view. I'm swimming towards it. You can see obviously clearing my ears all the time there. And you can also, interestingly enough, you can start to see the strobes. So we're about 40 metres deep here. Those strobes are maybe 10 metres above the wreck, so maybe 60-ish metres. And the fact that we can see them from this point is a really good sign. It means that the visibility is great. So there I am. I'm going in towards the lazy shot. to the end of the lazy shot, and you can see there's the quick release clip on the end. There's a weight I've already mentioned. There's a load of tags there that have kind of got wrapped around the weight. There's also the blue piece of string is a prusik, so I'm going to take that blue bit of string off now, and that's what I'm going to use to attach around to the lazy shot, and that's what we're going to attach the quick release to. The prusik, the purpose of that is to stop the lazy shot riding up the shot line. If it wasn't there, the prusik wasn't there, and there was a bit of current, then the lazy shot would just get pulled by the current and would end up shallower and shallower and shallower. The prusik holds it in position where it is. So you can see I've put the prusik on now. There's the clip that's going on there, and what I'll probably do now is just have a quick look round and see if everyone's there. Yeah, they're all there, and I'm just going to pull the prusik down a bit further so it goes down as far as possible. It just keeps the lazy nice and straight. So that's all in position. You can see I've got my two buddies with me, which is great. Next item on the agenda is clearly to get ourselves to the bottom, and you can see we're not very far away. Those strobes are already, they're flashing, so we're quite close to them. In fact, I think maybe that those strobes, they put them a bit higher up than perhaps we would do normally. Once again, that's a really good sign because it means the visibility is good. So you don't really put the strobes on until you can see the wreck. So the fact that these guys can see the wreck from this depth is really good news. So you can actually see somebody else has started to do the same as me, which is to put a double strobe. You can see actually my double strobes, there they are in my left hand. Unusually, I had them attached to my torch when I went in the water. Normally, I have them attached to one of my cylinders. But if I'm doing this, i.e. diving without a scooter, I don't bother doing that. Now there you go, you can start to see the wreck coming into view. That is absolutely brilliant. It just means conditions are really good, and you can see that. We can start to see the shape of the wreck. Now it's really interesting, this wreck, because it's quite unusual for us to dive a wreck in the English Channel that's this intact. You can see there I'm looking down on top of the engine. That's a double cylinder engine. Both cylinders are the same size, so it's not a compound engine. That means it's probably really old. That's interesting. So it's old and is pretty intact. Once again, these are unusual things. What else can we see in front of me there? That big circular thing, that's the funnel. The boiler would be underneath that. So once again, really unusual for that to still be in situ. So it turns out that the reason for this is that the wreck is full of coal. It was carrying that as the cargo, which means that the coal has given the wreck a really good level of protection against against being battered by waves and currents and those kind of things. So here I am on the wreck. You probably saw off to the left hand side there was quite a nasty bit of modern fishing line with some small buoys on the top of it. It's just one of those hazards. Diving these wrecks, they're all well fished, and you can see why, because there is a whole load of fish on this wreck, isn't there? Probably too small to eat, but this is clearly a breeding ground for fish, and therefore no doubt bigger fish come in and help themselves to eat them. So I'm moving forward here, and clearly this is this area here is probably where the bridge was. So this structure that I'm just looking at now is probably the bridge, or maybe the bridge was above it. Often they were built with wood. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking for anything that may have come off the bridge. Obviously you get bells on bridges, you get telegraphs, you get helms, you get compass binnacles, that kind of stuff. So I'm just having a look off to the side, maybe to see if it fell down. Can't see anything, which is unfortunate, but there's a few bits and pieces around here. I think there's something down there that catches my eye. It's difficult to see what it is on the video because it's kind of been burnt out by the strength of my torch. I'm gonna pull it out of the wreck now, have a quick look at it, and very quickly realise it's not very interesting. There we go. So whatever it was, not very interesting. Left down there, but you can start to see the coal that I mentioned earlier on. This ship is just full of it. So this is probably the forward cargo hold now, and if you can see up in the top there, you can I think see the edge of the hold. So I'm moving forward here. You've just seen Andy on the right hand side. Conditions are stunning. Loads of fish. Also lots of fishing net, bits of rope. This actually isn't that far out from Plymouth, probably only about 30 nautical miles. So this area will have been trawled and fished almost since this wreck was sunk. There you go, big bit of fishing line there. And I'm moving forward on the wreck, heading up towards the bow. There's another the edge of another cargo hold. You can see all the decking and lots of supports have collapsed. So it's kind of the deck level has fallen into the cargo. So yeah, I'm moving forward here, and you can see there's all sorts of bits of ship structure here. So those kind of poles in front of me, those would have been the things I think that held the decking up. They've now collapsed down along with the rest of the wreck. You know, all the superstructure is there on the coal. There's Andy off to my right hand side. We're both moving forward. Clearly the bow of a ship is a really good location where you may find a bell. And obviously we know that this ship is unidentified. We've actually got a log from a guy who dived this about 15 or 16 years ago. The log's really interesting. It's interesting for all sorts of reasons. The first reason is that he shows us what he was diving on in terms of gas. He was diving open circuit, and he was diving very, very weak trimix, which means he would have almost certainly been quite heavily narked. For those of you who don't know what I mean, narc is a term for nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen narcosis is something that affects divers, or anybody really, when you are at high pressure. The combination of high pressure and nitrogen results in nitrogen narcosis, which is an effect similar to being drunk. So his ability to remember things and recall things when he dived this wreck would have probably been reduced by the narcosis he was feeling. We don't get that because we're diving closed circuit rebreathers with relatively strong trimix mixtures, which means that the narcosis is really, really small. So what that means is we often find things or see things that were missed by the early pioneers from diving these wrecks. So you know, commonly we will find artifacts that they missed. We will see things, other things that they missed, you know, to do with ship layouts and those kind of things. So what I'm doing here is I'm at the bow. I'm actually off the side of the wreck. You can see I'm on the seabed, and you know, sometimes bells fall off onto the seabed. This is the starboard side of the wreck, and I'm just taking my time, having a really good look around. The wreck is, you know, by our standards, relatively shallow. So what that means is we get quite a long time down here. You know, relatively speaking, my bottom time on this wreck is going to be about 35 minutes, which given the fact it's quite small, means that I can spend the time looking around, looking underneath things, you know, trying to find stuff. So the other interesting thing about this dive you saw there is I just had my torch away from my camera, and you could see actually there was still loads of lights down here. So it's fantastic. The light has penetrated all the way down to this depth, which is really nice as well. Obviously torch is always going to be better, but it is nice. So we got good visibility, we got lots of ambient light. This is September, so this time of year is also when the water is the warmest as well. So it makes for great diving conditions, and it's why this was such a memorable dive. Well, one of the reasons. The other is obviously that I found the plate that I showed you earlier on, which means we identified the wreck. So yeah, going back to identifying the wreck. How do you do that? Well, I mean, it's not rocket science. We know the size of this wreck. It's intact. We've got the size from the information on the UK Hydrographic Office. We know it's about 78, 79 metres long. We know that there's a Cunard plate from it. So basically what we're looking for, and we know it's old as well. So what you do is you try to find a list of all the Cunard ships that were sunk. You then try and narrow them down to a relatively small one and an old one. And we know obviously where it was sunk. So if you can find information about the sinking that kind of, and the wreck that aligns all those things up, then it's fairly straightforward to identify it. What I've seen there is there's that's brass of some sort. As you can see, I've just tried to move it and I can't. That looks like some sort of, I don't know, strainer or way of releasing water, perhaps. Anyway, whatever it is, it's unmoved. But this is the bow area, and as you can see, I'm taking a good long time to look underneath things. It's a right mess though. There's net and there's bits of wreckage, and that thing in front of me there's probably the anchor capstan. Interestingly enough, I don't recall seeing any anchors, so not sure where they are. So going back to the identifying the wreck. So basically, you run all those things through the through the list of Cunard shipwrecks, and you end up with a wreck called the Nantes. So the SS Nantes is the name of this wreck. The Nantes was built in 1874 in Glasgow, and very sadly lasted a mere 14 years before it was sunk in a collision with a German sailing ship called the Theodor Ruger. It was when it was sunk, it was on passage from Liverpool to Havre, carrying a cargo of coal, which obviously ties in very nicely with what we've seen on this wreck. Sadly, pretty much everybody who was on board the Nantes died. There were only 3 survivors. 2 guys who jumped onto the Theodor Ruger, and then another guy who stayed on the Nantes and was part of the team that sort of tried to keep it afloat. Unfortunately, the Nantes went down about 10 hours later in the early hours of the morning, and he was the only person who was picked up from that. So it's quite a sad story. One of the interesting things about the Nantes, not just that it was owned by the Cunard shipping line, which obviously is still going today and is incredibly famous. You know, they operated wrecks like the Lusitania, the Mauritania, more modern, the QE2. So it's a very famous, part of a very famous shipping line. The other interesting thing about the Nantes is that the shipyard in which it was built in Glasgow, the Blackwood and Gordon shipyard, actually didn't survive for very long. Operated for about 50 years in the late 19th century before going bust at the beginning of the 20th century. One of the interesting things, though, is that the same year that the Nantes was built, they also built a wreck called the Hornet. They only built 2 ships that year, so the Hornet and the Nantes. The Hornet was lost off the north coast of Cornwall, near a place called Ilfracombe, and I've actually dived the Hornet, and during that dive a porthole was recovered, and they're quite a distinctive porthole, quite an old-fashioned design, and during this dive, towards the end of it, you'll see me see a porthole that's an identical design to the ones on the Hornet. So in fact, just while I'm talking, you can probably see down there on the seabed, that's a big anglerfish. I mean, they're stunning creatures, also really tasty. But what you probably don't want to do is stick your hand anywhere near its mouth, because it's got loads of big nasty teeth in it. So no doubt the anglerfish is realising there's loads of fish around and is quite fancies a couple of them for its dinner. So here I am. You've probably seen me going backwards and forwards over both sides of the wreck, just looking on the seabed to see if there's anything interesting down there, maybe a bell or something's fallen off the bridge. Disappointingly, not having any results. I'm coming up over the side of the wreck again, back onto the wreck, and there, in front of me, that looks like no, maybe not Andy. It's one of the other divers anyway. So it's quite a small wreck. So lots of divers around it. I think there's 8 or maybe 10 of us on the boat. So we're all in and around each other, looking for stuff and anything that may help us identify it. In fact, there's Andy in front of me. You can recognise him by the orange, small orange cylinders on the back of his rebreather. So here I am, swimming back down the wreck. Loads of fish life, loads of nets. All sorts of pipes. Really common with steam engines like this one. You just get pipes everywhere. I think they drove pretty much everything using steam. So the capstan up the front, for instance, would have probably been driven using steam. That looks like the edge of the hold, so I'm back probably just in front of the bridge. Somebody else up in front of me there, I think that's another Andy actually. He's like me, he uses yellow gloves, so makes him quite distinctive. Also means if you wear yellow gloves, nobody ever misses one of your hand signals underwater. Most people have black gloves and black dry suits, so and obviously it's fairly dark, so black on black is just not easy to see things. So yeah, here I am, just mooching around, forward of the bridge. Once again, loads of time, so not in any rush to do anything, which is really nice actually. And you can see here, going over to the other side of the wreck again. There's the seabed. That's got to be 4, maybe 5 meters deeper than where I am. Really easy to see it. Just shows, again, I think how good the visibility was on this dive. I think I've mentioned already about the length of time. So our typical run time on these dives off this boat is, the skipper says to us, no more than 2.5 hours surface to surface. So what that basically is going to give me is about 35 minutes on the bottom, which with sort of 4 or 5 minutes for the descent means I'm going to leave the bottom at about the 40-minute mark, and that will give me the 2.5 hour run time. And because the conditions are so nice in terms of it's nice and warm, the visibility is good, that just makes for a really, really pleasant dive. So here I am, I'm back at the bridge here. I'm kind of the report that we saw from the other dive, the guy who did that report would normally indicate if they found anything. So at that, he'd have written on there, oh, we found a telegraph, or we found the bell, or whatever it was they found. Now he's got nothing against that on this dive. So the kind of view is that everything is probably still down here. Now the other thing about the wreck I dived, the Hornet, is the bell that came off that is the nicest bell I've ever seen. An absolute stunner. So you would imagine, same shipyard, same year, that somewhere down here there is a really stunning bell as well. We didn't find it, unfortunately. So may still be down there. So anybody wants to get themselves a really decent bell, maybe the trick is to come out to the Nantes and have a good look around. Maybe it's there, maybe it's off the wreck, maybe it's buried under a bit of plate. Who knows? But there will be a bell down here somewhere. I think I'm maybe getting. Oh yeah, you probably just heard me there clearing my mask. So probably my mask was leaking a bit, getting a bit of water in. So that's a funnel off to my right hand side. So underneath that funnel, at the bottom of the wreck is going to be the boiler. That would have obviously produced the steam for use by the steam engine. And once again, I'm just coming up to the steam engine. We saw on the way down that it's a big old sort of standard double-cylinder steam engine. At this point, they hadn't figured out, or maybe they didn't have the technology to allow steam that had been, the pressure had been reduced to use it again. Maybe they just couldn't produce steam at high enough pressure in the first place. I'm not entirely certain. But yeah, so there's 2 cylinders, both cylinders at the same size, so both cylinders would have been fed with steam at the same pressure. As I say, that's a mark of an old steam engine. So, which figures in with the wreck, figures in with what we know about the Nantes. So the Nantes built in 1864. So, sorry, wrong, 1874. That is an old steamship. There's still loads of sailing ships cutting around at this point. So, they were in that kind of transitionary period, really. I'm looking down in here. I've seen something. You can see there. It's a big valve or big pipe or something. I've just knocked it to see what it's made out of. Also, probably trying to get that conger to see if it will poke off. I'm never that keen on congers, but I try and keep my hands away from their mouth. They've got big old teeth, and the way congers kill things is they grab hold of them and then they spin. Obviously, I'd prefer not to have that happen to my hand. So discretion is a better part of valor. Once again, just looking down in here, this is part of the ship near the engine, near the bridge, where sometimes things fall down underneath stuff. You never know. Looks as though somehow I've managed to, one of my regs has become dislodged on my bailout cylinder. That's why I'm kind of holding it in my right hand. I should probably put it away, put it back in the kind of elastic straps I have to hold things down. But anyway, probably can't be bothered, which is why I'm just holding on to it. Once again, loads of stuff down here. You can see all the pipe work. You can see also all the bits of fishing line as well, that nasty net that we saw on the way down. This is also round about where the shot is. It's somewhere in and around here. The great thing about James's skip, in fact there's a shot, you can just see it on the left hand side, and you can see where it's been, there's a big grapple on the bottom, you can see where it's been tied into a big bit of steam pipe or something like that. So a really good bit of shotting. Skipper's put the shot at the kind of the highest point on the wreck, which is the engine, and it's great because if you come down on a wreck and you find the engine, you can instantly locate yourself. You know where you're going to be, you know where everything else is. Really nice. There's another big valve down there. There it is, you can see it. Often referred to as foo-foo valves. No idea why foo-foo valves. I think it's an indication that just don't know what they're called, so it's a foo-foo valve. And there's the engine off to my right hand side. There it is, big old double cylinder steam engine. Loads of other bits and pieces around. You can see it's all kind of collapsed in, but still lots of bits of the engine are buried, so we can only really see the cylinder heads. Below those would have been obviously the pistons, and then the crankshaft, you know, on the prop shaft is at the bottom, and you know, just can't see that because there's just so much wreckage and stuff in the way. Those of you who've seen some of my other videos will know that I've found, you know, makers plates and stuff in and around the engine area, so that's why I'm taking my time, having a really good look, you know, just trying to glimpse and see if there's something that sticks out that helps identify it. I mean, there's bits of brass here, you know, that's you know, some sort of probably oil box perhaps. It's pretty solid, so not coming off. These kind of engines had required really regular oiling, so there were oil boxes all over them that distributed the oil into the bits that needed lubrication. So yeah, loads of coal and stuff around here, so you know, the cargo has come down and filled into the engine space, so that would probably be the kind of rear holds. This vessel had the engine in the middle of it, really common. That's kind of the more standard design, I guess. And when bulkheads and stuff rot away, then clearly the cargo shifts in. I mean, some of this coal might actually have been coal for actually the ship to burn. So clearly it would have used that. That would have fed the boilers. Often coal is stored to the side of the engine, so that may be what we're looking at here. Don't know. What we are looking at though is definitely loads of netting. You know, that big net that you kind of saw at the beginning stretches all the way to the back of the boat, and we'll see more of it later on. In fact, I think I've got a bit stuck on me there, so I'm just kind of untangling myself from it. Yeah, there you go. I've swam underneath that. It's kind of always a danger on these kind of wrecks, is that the net does float, and you've just got to be careful of it, particularly if you're swimming down near the bottom of it. As you'd expect, I've got a couple of knives located on my diving equipment. I've got a knife on the inflator hose for the wing, for the buoyancy device. I've got another one on my waistband as well, which is more of a kind of trilobite type cutter thing. So I've got a couple of ways of getting rid of net and stuff if I need to. Like most of the stuff on my diving gear, it's all about redundancy. So you know, if you lose one thing, you've got a backup. So that's the approach to kind of knives and cutters. I don't have a big kind of knife, you know, shark killing knife, such as the sort of thing that would have, you know, you just saw divers in the 70s or the 80s or whatever. My knives are kind of relatively small, but really sharp and really good for cutting net, because clearly that's the major hazard. A few bits of brass in and around here. That's maybe a bit of a pulley or something. I don't know. A few other bits and pieces around in here. That one looks like, you know, maybe half a clamp or something. I don't know. I just put them all together, so anybody dives it again, they'll see them all there. They won't get buried. Not sure they're particularly interesting though. I'm in against the side of the wreck here. I think this is the starboard side. I've moved around the side of the engine. Once again, you're just having a good look around, looking for whatever might be down there. Almost certainly there is an engine maker's plate in here somewhere. There's also probably an engine telegraph, but I suspect it's just under all this plate and stuff. Maybe in 10 or 20 or 50 years time, when the wreck has broken down even more, some of this sort of stuff will become visible. no idea. Obviously, like all these wrecks, it will deteriorate, and that will, maybe something will turn up that does have the name on or provides a conclusive link. But in the meantime, my crockery is the best thing, I think. So one of the interesting things about the Nantes is the kind of collision that I mentioned earlier on. It happened at night. I guess it's easy to see why that would happen. I'm not sure the weather was great, and obviously the two ships collided. After the ships had collided, both of them ended up sinking. The Theodore Ruger went down, and the Nantes, the crew on board the Nantes. The collision happened about 9 o'clock at night. The crew on the Nantes then fought to keep the ship afloat until about 6 o'clock the next morning. Because this wreck is so old, we don't have any photos of it, but there is some information in newspapers. So interestingly enough, there's an article from, of all things, the Sydney Morning Herald. The copy I've seen is really poor quality, but one of the things it does say is that the sole survivor who got picked up, he reports that the vessel had been smashed during the collision, and they tried everything to stop the leak. They had something called a leak stopper, which I would imagine, some sort of big bung or something, I guess. They also put in beds and bedding and everything they possibly could just to stop the water coming in. Unfortunately, that didn't work, and the vessel went down. So, very sad, especially as there was 22, 23 people on board, and only one of them survived to be picked up. So really sad. Now here on the wreck, you can see I've been moving sternwards, and here I am at the prop. You can see it stands up, quite well from the seabed. There's a big old prop in there. You can see the remains of the rudder as well. It's really quite intact at this point, and you just need to look at that prop to realise that it is an old style prop, iron, four-bladed, and without much in the way of, it's simple, isn't it? There's no kind of convoluted curves on it or anything, which once again is an indication of an old prop. There's also shed loads of netting and rope and all sorts of bits and pieces caught around here, and loads of fish obviously living their best life. So interesting enough, I've seen videos where people say, I should never go to the stern, they're really dull. Don't know why people like looking at props and those kind of things. Well, I actually really like looking at props. I think they're quite interesting. Often you can learn things from them. So you can certainly have a good guess of the age of a vessel by looking at the prop. There's other things you can sometimes find. Rudders are sometimes off to one side, for instance. There's bits and pieces fall off the side of wrecks at sterns. So that's what I'm doing here, just having a look around. But doesn't seem to be anything particularly interesting here. Just a whole load of fish and bits of the wreck there. Once again, it's a lovely part of the wreck. I always think, the stern. So I'm gonna come back up on top in a moment, and I think that's a really lovely shot there. Once again, showing how much ambient light there is, how many fish there are, how well this wreck stands up off the seabed, considering it's been underwater since 1888, so that's nearly 150 years at the time I've made this video. So absolutely incredible that it's so intact when you consider it's in the English Channel, which is subject to massive gales and strong tidal movements, and obviously things like trawling and things do damage wrecks. So incredible that it's this intact. But once again, there's loads more netting. You can see I'm going over the top of it. If you have a look down there, you can see an anchor. There it is. I'm just going to light it up with my torch. Bit odd finding an anchor at the stern, but there is one there. You can also see down there there's a porthole as well. So I'm currently burning it out, and this is the porthole that I say I've seen an identical one on the Hornet. I'm going to lift it up in a moment, and the viz is going to go, but it's a lovely porthole with a bronze deadlight on it as well. So quite unusual to see those. Glass is intact. So it's really nice, and there you go. You can see it's wrapped in netting. I'm pulling the netting off, and I'm getting it out. So hopefully we can all have a look at it. a bit of a fight getting it out of the netting. The good thing about this netting is you can normally kind of pull it and it will come off. Obviously, kicking up the viz. There's loads of dirt and silt and everything in here. But there you go. You can see that. That is quite a nice porthole there. It's got a bronze deadlight off to the right hand side. You can see the glass and the main bit of the porthole off to the left. So you would imagine this is probably on the stern accommodation, maybe part of the ship or anything. So really nice to be able to see this kind of stuff. I think at this point I've just realised that while I was doing that, I've managed to get myself tangled up a bit in the in some of that net that's kicking around. So any moment now you're going to see that I've got my fin caught. I'm going to look around and back to it and try and figure out how I get my foot out. There you go. There's my fin caught in a bit of rope, a bit of that netting. So got rid of it. All is well. That looks like the kind of combing round the one of the rear cargo holds. So what I'm doing now is I'm starting to swim back towards the engine, back towards the middle of the ship, which is where the shot line is. And the reason for that, of course, is that I've been down quite a long time. I don't know if you saw on my computer there, but it's indicating 111 minutes TTS. So that's TTS is time to surface. So what it says now is if I left the bottom now and ascended as quickly as I could, it would take me 111 minutes to get to the surface. So that's just under 2 hours. Remember that the limit that we're given is 2.5 hours. Now, I don't know if you saw, I've spotted something, and it's a couple of bits of crockery. So I'm going down to have a look at them. Always check out crockery. You never know what you might find on it. And obviously, we know that this is the bit of crockery that helps me identify the wreck. So it turns out to be a really, really good decision. So I've got it in my hand, and the reason I've got it in my hand rather than putting it in a bag or anything is because I know that I need to be getting up really quick. It's that 111 minutes TTS. The skipper's going to get upset if I bust the 2.5 hours. So I'm kind of worried about that. But also I've also just seen something else as well. So you've got to have a look at it, haven't you? Okay, and that's the top of a broken casserole dish. So I think I decided that this isn't worth bringing up. I'm able to have a look at it. There's nothing on there, but I am going to have a quick look and see if there's anything else in there. So I don't think there was anything, just that conger eel. So and I've already mentioned I don't like messing around with conger eels. They've got big teeth and they're very strong. So it's time to be getting back to the shot line, getting off the wreck and getting myself up. I'm kind of slightly unhappy because clearly there is more crockery down there, and I'd love to have spent more time looking for it. Unfortunately, I only spotted it at the end of the dive, so my bad. Maybe if I ever go back, I'm going to spend quite a lot more time down there. Maybe there's an intact plate. You never know. But anyway, there's a shot line. I'm starting to head up. You can see how much ambient light there is, how good the viz is. There's that nasty rope that I've been tangled in on the right-hand side a couple of times. There we go. There's me coming up. And what am I doing now? Well, I am changing my set point to 1.5. So what does that mean? It means that I am putting more oxygen into my rebreather loop. By putting more oxygen into my rebreather loop, I am going to accelerate the amount of time. I'm going to accelerate my decompression. It means I'm going to get to the surface a lot quicker, which is obviously what I want to do. So having more oxygen in the rebreather loop will help that happen. I've just taken off my strobes. I've got my 2 bits of crockery. One of them you can really clearly see there's some sort of markings on. Unfortunately, as it turns out, those markings are just the people who made it, so they're no use whatsoever in identifying it. The other one, the bowl, is the one that we've already seen. All those bubbles that you can see around me at the moment, that's me breathing out. As I ascend, I've got to get rid of gas from the loop, so I'm breathing it out through the side of my mouth. And all the time I'm ascending, as you can see, I'm coming up actually quite quickly here. As I come up, a bit of multitasking. I'm going to turn my strobes off. Having flashing strobes close to your eyes is a bit annoying. What I'll do now is have a quick look at the dive profile. So this is a download after the dive from my dive computer. And what you see down the left hand side, that is the depth along the bottom, that's the dive time, and the white line is where I was at each point in the dive. So you can see, looking at this, that I spent broadly about 35 minutes on the bottom and came up, started my ascent about the 40-minute point. Once you start the ascent, then you've got to be very careful that you don't incur an excessive risk of decompression illness, and that red line is the decompression ceiling. So the computer says don't go above this, otherwise you're going to incur the risk of decompression illness. So you can see there I'm pretty much below the red line all the way through to the end of the dive, and I surface round about 2.5 hours, which keeps the skipper happy, which is also something you want to make sure happens. So this is really towards the end of the dive now. I've done all that decompression. The red line is gone, so I'm now good to ascend. And you can see there, I'm having a look at my computer, and for those of you who know Shearwaters, you'll see the top hand corner, it's saying I'm at 3 meters. I've got 1 minute to go until it clears. Also, you can see conditions are beautiful as well. There's still fish around. You can see the sun is shining, the sea is blue, and you know, I've had a really good dive. I'm really chuffed. I know the sea is flat as anything above me because I can see it. The bag that you can see underneath me there is actually contains a Kindle. I keep a Kindle in a waterproof bag, and it's what I do on decompression stops. I read it. Helps the time go past. But I know I'm coming up to the surface, so I've put it away. I'm looking at my computer. I'm waiting for it to clear. There's the edge of the Kindle just floating up past me. It's full of air, the bag, so it's quite buoyant. And below me, you can just see the end of the decompression trapeze as well. So I've spent quite a long time there, you know, an hour or so. So that time is nearly done, and it's time to go up. And I'm looking forward to that 1 minute on my dive computer ticking down to 0, and I'll get a deco clear, which is great. That's my moment for coming up, and I'll know that I've minimised the risk of decompression illness, and all should be well. You can see loads of fish. I'm just having a quick look up round, and there you go. There's the boat. You can see it kind of above me, sort of top left hand side of the screen. Once again, shows just how good the visibility and how good the conditions are. And yeah, loads and loads of fish. You can see the sun shining through. It's just a lovely day, and clearly I'm getting up very close to the surface. The conditions are so good that the boat is just floating next to me. I think I'm the last diver out on this dive, so they're waiting for me to get out so they can all go home. I like to get my money's worth, so I do the full duration of dive. Other people, you know, sometimes cut it a bit short or whatever. So here I am, just swimming up to the boat. You can see how flat it is. It's just wonderful considering we're 30 miles out at sea. Getting on the lift is going to be a doddle today. Not needing to grab hold of it too much or whatever. And there we go. James is lifting me back up on board the boat. You can see all the other divers are in already. There's a big load of gear, and I think my video is going to end shortly. So hope you've enjoyed this. As always, you know, please feel to like, subscribe, tell your mates, drop me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.